So we've got the question come through, should we hire or should we subcontract? And I think this is one that people have really struggled with. I know I can relate to that a lot, having run a construction business. Who should I hire for what? What should I subcontract? So we're going to unpack this one today. Yeah. It's going to be fun.
Yeah, I can even remember here, like at Congenius, we've struggled with that concept sometimes, even of like what roles do we have versus projects that need fulfilled and things like that. So anyway, I'm excited to dive into this one. I think it's gonna be valuable. But break down before we kind of get into the meat of the podcast, like what perspective like are we coming from for this podcast? Who are we talking to?
I think you start asking this question when you have more work as opportunities than you can keep up with. So people are calling you, you've built a good name, reputation, or there's just a market saturated with tons of work available out there. There's not enough people to do it. Your pipeline's full. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so people are calling you, asking you to do stuff. And you're like, well, I don't really do that, but they're asking me to do it. So maybe I should subcontract that out. Or you're in a situation where you've agreed to do work and you just can't get it done. Yeah. And so you're thinking,
because you have too much work to fulfill. Is that what you're saying?
Yes. Yeah. You have more work to fulfill than you can possibly do with the team you have. And so you're thinking, I need to expand operations. Yeah. I need employees. I need subcontractors. And you're asking yourself, well, which strategy should I choose? Yeah. Is it subs? Is it employees? I think we want people to walk away from this episode thinking about really some reflection of what your skills are, some of your goals, some of the personality that you carry to the conversation, or what your value proposition that you bring to people. I think that's a big piece of this.
Yeah, if you've ever listened to the Contractor Commute, we're going to make you self-reflect as we talk through the podcast.
We do it when we prep for it. We think about it. It was funny as we're getting ready for the show today of how much reflection we do as a natural course of preparing, of thinking, yes.
Remember that time? Yeah, right.
Well, that wasn't good. Yeah. You might come from this from the standpoint of never having hired people or hired subcontractors. And so you don't know if one strategy or the other or both would work. So you might be kind of just green to this.
Just new to it, yeah.
Yeah. You might also be in a situation where you're hiring people and you're making that work well. Yeah. And I think we have some nuggets for you as well here. Yeah. Or you're in a situation where
where a lot of people are, maybe.
Man, hiring people sucks. Subcontractors, they're just, how do you find good subs?
Yeah, how do you find good help?
If you're in that position, I think that's where most people want to go today.
Yeah, the people who are like, I never want to do that again.
Yes. Right? And so many people we know are in a spot where they're thinking, I tried hiring people and that was so terrible. I'm never going to do that again. Yeah. So I guess we just want to get into why people are so negative on it, right?
Yeah. I think we hear a lot from contractors that we talk to. Good help's tough to find, right? Like it's just, if you want something done right, you need to do it yourself. That kind of mindset is something we hear often in this space. And so I think that's just kind of what we wanted to hit head on of like, man, why is that the recurring theme and recurring, narrative, I guess? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think we want to challenge this a little bit. Because I think the simplistic approach is just to say good help is tough to find. Mm-hmm. And so many things can be swept under that rug that may or may not even be true. Let's start with subcontractors because I think this is just an aspect of, to the point of narratives. Yeah. Good subs are tough to find, or you've had these bad experiences. So let's kind of unpack maybe when we say this bad subcontractor experience, what went into that or didn't go into that. So you've been in this position where you need drywall work done. Mm-hmm. You find a drywall contractor, get them after it and doing it, and it just turns out not to your expectations. I think this can speak to just not verifying that the person that you hired to do a job is capable, or even just the reviews. Are they the person to do a job? Even more common than that is you work with a guy that you really like, and he's demonstrated to you that he's precise, he's great at something. Right. And the next thing you do, you're asking him to do things that aren't necessarily part of his wheelhouse.
He hasn't done it before, maybe, yeah.
Exactly. Mm-hmm. My electrical contractor who's amazing at installing services and wiring homes. And now you're asking him, hey, while you're here, can you do something? And he's like, well, I've never done that low voltage lighting like that before. Yeah.
Do you think most people, though, are going to be that honest and be like, I've never done that? Or do you think people are going to be?
Were.
Yeah. I'm like, surely, because people are so, like, most of the time they're hungry to win the job and want to be compliant and want to help. Mm-hmm. And so I'm like, I think it might be hard to actually uncover and get to the truth of like what your experience has been. Because I don't know that a lot of people are humble, maybe is the right word. I don't know, in that way of being just super upfront and honest about their capabilities.
It's a tactical size illusion. You just look more impressive than you really are. I mean, I think we all can find ourselves in that spot sometimes. And probably one of the most challenging parts of running a business or even just being human is we have this vision, this goal of who we are and who we want to be. Mm-hmm. And essentially who we are today and what we want to be down the road get kind of meshed together. And as a business, you get to that spot all the time.
Yeah, right.
You're essentially like, where we want to be in 5 years might be glorious and grand, mm-hmm. but where we're at today has some problems.
Right.
And we sometimes...
It's like judging your intentions versus your actions, right? We talk about that a lot. Yeah.
So maybe that's a piece of it.
Yeah.
Where it's tough to acknowledge. And I think where we like to promote is just saying radical honesty in the sense of like, well, I haven't done that before. I want to be amazing at it. And so let's go from that standpoint.
And I'm happy to try it, or I'm happy to whatever. I mean, but at least clarifying it in the upfront.
Yeah. So I think that's the verification step of like, you have the right subcontractor on the job. Now that's not enough though.
Right. It's one piece, right?
Yeah, one piece of it. So we have the right contractor.
Yeah.
But then the scope of what's going on, this gets missed so often, is does that contractor understand from start to finish their scope of the work, what they're responsible for, the quality expectations, the time expectations, the outcomes, right? Do they understand what you expect?
Yeah. And I think what sounds like you're saying is that if they don't understand the scope, that's on you.
Yes.
Right? Like, because you're not actually like bringing the clarity up front to actually know what are the expectations of the job. What is a job well done?
How often do we hear somebody, they should have known that? Mm-hmm. What kind of electrical contractor comes in here and expects us to provide the outlets? Or whatever. Well, that should be known up front. That should be clear in writing right up front. Like, this is what you're doing. This is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And then the financial piece. I mean, so many things go sideways because the finances aren't clear. I mean, how many guys, and where this kind of sneaks up to is in trusted relationships. The first time you work with somebody, you're unlikely to tell them, go for it. I don't care what it costs. But you've been working with somebody for 2 years or 6 months. Mm-hmm. And you're like, that guy's always been fair to me before. I had this with a drywall contractor. Amazing guy. I love the guy. I got a bill and I was surprised. It seemed very high. Yeah. And usually he had been very reasonable. Well, just because I'd worked with him for so long, I never questioned the finances. Right. Instead of sitting on saying, I know this job's a little more complex, a little bit outside of what we normally do. Can you ballpark this one for me? Because I need to know the budget a little bit more.
Give me an idea. Yeah.
And that way he'd know right up front of what we both expected. And if the job was running long,
he's going to tell you, hopefully.
Yeah, he would be like, hey, Ben, this one's got a lot more time in it.
Yeah.
And I'm looped into that conversation instead of everything's all done, wrapped up. I have no agency whatsoever. And he say, pay what you owe.
Right. Because his perspective of that would be like, if you're just like, trust him to do it, he doesn't need to loop you in as part of the project.
100%.
He doesn't need to communicate with you a day in or whatever, right?
In fairness to him, there's no reason why he should communicate something other than that, because in the past he never needed to.
Right.
Yeah. And so that's not on him, that's on me.
That's good.
So high bill is my problem.
Yeah.
So scope, capabilities, all these things are clear right from the beginning.
Yeah, it's good. It's good.
Yeah. The whole subcontractor, you kind of like turning them loose and saying, go for it.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's prerequisites that we didn't meet. I remember getting called out on this on a project in my drywall contract.
Another drywall contract.
I don't know what's with my drywallers, but him being so frustrated and just being saying to me, Ben, one complete process at a time. Mm-hmm. And I remember just feeling somewhat hurt by the comment because that's what I'm trying to do. And I'm thinking, but that's not what we did in this particular instance. Just because I'm trying to do that. I like organization.
Intention,
you know me. Like, but it didn't happen that time. So I have to own that and saying, yeah, you're right. And I think that's one thing that really messes up our subcontractors is when we're in a spot where things are chaotic.
Yeah.
Things are not organized. We don't know where things are. We don't know the order of operations. And next thing we know, they're not doing a great job because we're not doing a great job.
Well, and you're feeling pressure, so you're putting pressure on them, right? Things like that, yeah.
So there might be plans, there might be permits, there might be engineering things that aren't solved, and they're on the job, and you're trying to solve it while they're there. That is not good.
Yeah.
Sometimes
they're not teed up for success at that point.
You need to just stop that job and just say, we need to solve a few things, and then I'm sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good. I think, what we're kind of saying with all of this is it's not necessarily that there's a bad subcontractor. Now, there could be. Like, we're not saying that it's always on you as the GC or the person who's employing the subcontractor, but it's so much more nuanced than just simply saying it's all your fault or it's all their fault, and here's why. And so I think that's kind of some of the things we're trying to highlight is like some things to be aware of if you're not teeing them up for success, if you're not qualifying them, if the scope's not clear, those are all areas that I think we just can get better in.
Yes. And it challenges the narrative that, man, I just got a bad subcontractor.
Yeah.
We need to self-reflect and say, well, maybe we're in a spot where we're not teeing subcontractors up for success. And this speaks to the original question. Should we hire a subcontractor? Well, if we want disastrous results and it's unorganized and we have the wrong people and the scope's not clear and the expectations aren't clear, well, what do we expect would happen?
Right.
It's funny because we're almost projecting on them of saying, well, they should know what they're doing. Jackwagon,
right.
But instead of being like, no, if you are employing somebody as a general contractor, you bring value to the table. And what is the value proposition you're bringing?
Yeah.
That is that you know what you're doing and you know how to manage subcontractors.
That's true. Yeah.
So let's dive in somewhat from just going to glance off from here into the employee side.
Yeah. How's it different? I mean, from your perspective, I'm like, some of the things we're saying make sense from an employee standpoint too, of like, if you've had a rough experience with an employee, are they teed up for success? Have they qualified? A lot of the similarities, I think, with both of those. But what do you feel like is different with employees or some of that like poor employee experience?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a very strong similarity between the two. I think some of the distinctions are probably that the subcontractor is kind of that's their own kind of contained, they're supposed to fulfill a piece of work.
Yep.
Whereas on an employee side, you're more directive in them achieving a result.
Right.
And saying, I want you showing up at 8:00 and clocking it out at 5 or whatever that is.
Yep.
You're managed control of how, not just, get it done.
What to do, but like how to do it. Yeah. That's good.
And that's a big piece of it. There's a lot of responsibility with employees. And let's challenge the narrative of like, man, I just had bad employees. Good help's tough to find. We've been there and we've hired some amazing people and we've hired some mediocre people. We've also hired people that would have been amazing in a different context. And I think that's a big distinction because we can hire somebody that given the right opportunity would really, really excel. But in the situation where we're putting them, we're either too busy to give them enough guidance. There's just not enough of a role for them. I mean, these are things that make bad employees, but really are things that are directly come back to me as the boss. Yeah.
I was just thinking while you were saying that, like, we keep saying the good help's hard to find, but it's really like good help is tough to create. Right? Like that's actually more the narrative that I think we're trying to speak to from the subcontractor side and the employee side. It is hard to create. You're right. It is hard to find good subcontractors and good employees, but it's hard to build and create. Yeah. So maybe we can just kind of shift the narrative on how people are actually thinking about bringing people on. And then that at least frames it into a way of like, hey, how can I get better at this? It's not just them, it's me too.
We had brought somebody on to our team recently. And within a week, there was serious questions on that person's competence. One of the things is we leaned into that narrative instead of running with, well, another one bites the dust.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
We were saying, well, what is it about the situation that's not working? And what is it? Is it a core competency? And it wasn't. This person's a highly competent person. But it was almost being like, let's challenge our own assumptions. Let's challenge our own stories about this and then get to the bottom of this person's performing really well for us right now. Yeah. And I think part of it was getting past that initial blame game of good help, tough to find kind of a thing instead of like, are they teed up to win? Yep. We've had situations where somebody is teed up to win and they don't perform well. Yeah. Core competency, they're not the right person.
Then they're not a good fit. Yeah.
And then we can part peacefully.
Ways. And exactly.
Yeah. But this is a aspect of presence and involvement in people. And if you're so busy performing and doing things and you're not present to guide somebody and help them win, one of the hardest things for me to adjust to coming from somebody that liked the doing side of like
get stuff done,
getting stuff done and the quality level, and then hiring employees and realizing my role shifted to being somebody that needed to be present and involved in people's lives. And, about 8 or 9 years ago, I had somebody on my team that just needed that guidance, needed somebody that listened, and I think when you're so busy just doing go, 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 you just can't give them that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's good. I think one of the things too, just in hiring employees and doing that well is it's one thing that we've talked about on the podcast before, but it's like being able to address things frankly and promptly, right? Not letting something just build up over months and things like that. Because then it's like they're blindsided when you're frustrated that they did something wrong the 10th time. It's like, hey, why didn't you call it out the first time? So that it was like an opportunity to improve and those kinds of things. And so I think that is a piece of teeing up employees for success is actually like developing the skill to address things frankly and properly.
You have this slowly building tension where you're just feeling like I've had it up to here and I've had it up to here, and that person's blind to it.
Yeah.
And next thing
that's
you know,
unfair.
it's totally unfair.
Yeah.
And I think also this, that piece of it as well is just keeping the slate clean is sometimes helping you even arrive at a conclusion something's not a good fit a lot sooner.
True.
Because what's the most fair thing for both your employee and you if you're in a situation, now kind of like veering off topic somewhat, but somewhat just saying, hey, this is not a good fit and calling it out early instead of trying to force something to work that you're frustrated, they're frustrated, and things just aren't working right. So I love that. The guidance piece. I think also clearly scoping roles when you have employees, that's something that we've seen so often, particularly with small businesses where you're used to wearing a lot of different hats. And next thing, we bring somebody onto our team and we're saying, hey, we need you to replace these 5 things that we do. And that person just doesn't do a great job at that. Yeah. Because it's just not fair to them to expect them to do a whole bunch of things that just aren't related to their role. You're looking for a unicorn and you're projecting this person to be that, or hiring them to be a carpenter and then saying, hey, I need you to go do plumbing, by the way. And then you're saying, I had the inverse happen. I hired a plumber, great plumber, amazing guy. Well, we didn't have enough plumbing work. Yeah. Next thing I know, I'm having him do things that he's not good at, and I'm frustrated. Why is he so slow? Well, of course,
he's never done it before.
He doesn't put fencing in. What am I doing? You know, and so I think that's on me, not on him. So we're challenging the narrative of really bad help's tough to find. Are we creating the good help, like you brought up?
Yeah, I think that's good. And I think sometimes the symptoms of a bad employee can be like acting out and disrespect and just like apathy, right? Like just being passive and not really caring, right, about the role. And I think a big piece of that is maybe they just weren't teed up for success. They weren't actually like given any clarity. They weren't given a role that was like something that they know what makes you happy, you know, or they know what a win is, you know, how to win, I guess would be the.
Yeah. I think this requires us just kind of almost like moving to a different chair and looking at our own seat. Put yourself in the position of one of your employees, if you have employees, or if you don't have employees, of what that role, what you expect that person to be. And you given that responsibility without the ownership and control that you have as a boss, as an owner. Yeah. It's extremely difficult sometimes to expect them to perform at the level you expect. Right. We've had a guest on the podcast recently, maybe 6 months ago, and he was saying if he can get, was it 50%?
I think it was 60%. A little better than 50.
Okay. But if somebody performed at 60% of his level, that was an amazing employee.
Yeah. It was worth the investment.
Yeah, it was worth hiring that person and putting them into his company. And so sometimes we have this expectation that's not clear. And to your point of acting out, that's the symptom of potentially a very toxic culture that we created as owners.
Yeah. Which I think that 60% rule kind of thing is like, one thing that's nice about that is it like sets your expectations as a boss a little bit more legitimate. Like the playing field is a little bit more level. You're not like expecting this all-star to be exactly who you are and how you would do it, because nobody's going to do it how you're going to do it, and you know, and the way you're going to do it and the time you're going to do it, you know, those kinds of things. People don't always have that level of clarity or ability, right? And so I think that 60% thing, like even as a leader, to be like, hey, that's a win for us if we can have 60%, it gives you more grace for people too.
Listen, I need you to work for this company. We're barely started. We're going to pay you what we can pay you. Your paycheck's not guaranteed. It's kind of just, you know, we're just take whatever work we can do. Yeah. I'm your boss. I don't know what I'm doing. And by the way, you need to be an absolute rock star. I mean, who are we kidding?
Sounds
it's
just
great. Who are we kidding? Nobody's actually getting that person on their team on day one. You know, you're going to find some mediocre person that's thinking, I'll take the risk. I got fired in my last place. And, you know, so it's like sometimes we're just not qualified even from a standpoint of who we're hiring to have incredible people on the team. Sometimes you get lucky, but you know, I think that's an aspect of sometimes we just don't recognize that.
Yeah, so true. So true. And I think that with some of these experiences that maybe you guys have had listening to this, you know, it's an easy talk off and it's a blame game, right? Like it's easy to justify things after the fact, but the reflective piece of like, well, it was just a bad employee, you know, and I fired him and moved on, you know. I think that's probably the narrative that a lot of people have adopted, and let's not.
You didn't learn anything. They didn't learn anything. And it's unfortunately a vicious cycle of rinse and repeat. Next bad employee, next bad subcontractor. And I think if that's you, if you feel like you're just rinse and repeat this cycle of just, man, I can't find nobody that works here is nothing but a loser. Or I'm just struggling, or it's a very high likelihood of them being very bad. it's probably time to kind of like self-reflect a bit and say, it's not that couldn't be true.
True.
But is the framework in place?
Yep.
Are you providing that clarity? Are
So
you
good.
providing a great expectation experience? And so I think we're going to transition into the employee side of things of just what does it take?
Yeah, what's required.
Yeah, what's
right?
required to manage.
Well, I think one of the things we talked about too is you mentioned the value piece of like, hey, well, you have to add value, whether you're the GC who's managing subcontractors or you're the leader, right, of the, the actual company managing employees. So to clients, you have to have a value proposition, like to hire subcontractors, right? Like to make it make sense from a subcontractor. Can you break that down from what you were saying earlier?
So I'm coming to a client and saying, I'm going to do this particular project and I'm going to charge you X number of dollars.
Yep.
And as a part of that assumption, I'm going to mark everything up a certain percentage, right?
Right.
It's like, well, that better be worth something. I better be adding some value onto what those other people bring to the table. And if the net result is that things just don't go quite according to plan and we're struggling and all the rest of it, am I really providing that markup value?
Right.
Or am I just trying to cover my overhead and stay alive?
Yeah, true.
So I think that is, I think one of the things that we hear quite often too is, well, I found this subcontractor, that's my friend, and so therefore there's your value proposition.
Right.
That's not good enough.
Yeah, not enough to know a guy.
Yeah, I know a guy. Yeah, and we'll hook you up with him. That'll cost you several thousand. That's not a good value proposition, and I think one of the reasons why some people are going to challenge this.
Yeah, why isn't it?
Right. Yeah, I think one of the reasons why is because if that's all you got, you're essentially taking on risk that you really don't. I mean, if you're not providing more than that in the sense of managing or improving the outcomes, what you're saying is you're disconnected enough from that experience with, if it goes bad, you're taking liability, but without any control.
Yeah.
You didn't actually have input into making that better. You don't have the skills or you didn't tee it up. And so therefore, if it goes sideways, it's going to go sideways more often than not. And that markup is going to feel very light.
Right. Yeah. It's going to get eaten up. Right.
Yeah. Subcontractor, I think just moving quickly into managing people effectively. Let's just take all the negatives and inverse them essentially.
Nice. Yep.
Yeah. Vetting and teeing people up for success is essentially the essence of what we want to do here. So finding the right person from a subcontractor standpoint, we want to find the right subcontractor. We want to qualify them, vet them, make sure that they're actually what they say they are,
right?
And then tee them up to win.
Yeah, and then presence-wise, you have to actually be on the job, right? You have to be able to communicate with the subs, with your own contractors that are fulfilling, and the customer. Like, I think communication, if you're going to be a GC or managing projects, things like that, like communication has to be just high on your ability, right?
And you can't do that if you're not there.
Right.
So critical is just being there to spot stuff. Like, how many times just being at a job and saying, what is that?
Right.
Why does that happen that way?
Yeah. Why is the door that color? Why is the whatever? Yeah. I was on a job with a contractor a few months ago, probably now. And I remember we were going to a job and I think I've shared this story on the podcast before, but we pull up in the truck and she's a project manager on the job, and she goes, "Oh, I don't think the customer's going to like the color of that stain," And then we go up, and the guys that were staining, they were like, "Yeah, customer came out. They said they liked it." And literally 5 minutes later, she gets a call from the customer, and he's like, "Man, it's a lot darker, a lot more gray than we were thinking." It was just funny. That's good. I'm like, she saw it, and she was managing the project.
Stop the project,
and she did. She was like, "Hold off on that. Like, we'll figure out a way to do it. Change it up, whatever." Wow. I'm like, I don't even know how you get stain out of a wood that you just stained, but
Yeah, guys, if you manage subcontractors and something feels off, stop.
Yeah.
I mean, don't be the passive person and be like, I don't know about that. Verify.
Yeah.
If something feels off, it probably is off.
That's good.
Trust your gut on that.
Very good.
Yeah. You got to be inquisitive. You got to be asking questions, not making assumptions.
Yep.
Somebody says, well, the client, we had this happen on a project where I assumed my designer, my project manager talked about a selection. And the next thing you know, they hadn't.
Yeah.
And we end up eating the cost of this because that conversation hadn't happened.
But with you, but not with them, right?
Right. Yeah. So, from our side, we're like, how could that have ever happened? We had these conversations. So we're in the same thing, the blame game goes down. But at the same time, it's like, if we don't know for a fact, it's not signed off on, it didn't happen.
Yeah, there you go.
So ask questions. Like, there's no stupid questions. Yeah. Something feels off or you don't know. You don't have to be the know-it-all.
Yeah, be inquisitive, especially if it's like something that's new and a process that's new, and like, hey, why are we doing it that way? Why are we applying it that way? When, when's it going in? When are we, just to be able to actually manage projects effectively, organize your schedule effectively. That keeps your subs happy too.
And the best relationships with subcontractors are sometimes when you have all these other prerequisites, but then also you have the experience yourself. You've worked with the subcontractor, or you've worked in that industry, or you've worked around it, and you can now kind of say, well, you're asking the right questions. You're seeing the right things. It's not everything's new to you. But like, well, I thought that might be done that way.
Yeah. Do you feel like that's a prerequisite to even being a GC or a PM?
I think so. And the reason behind that is back to the value proposition. Why is somebody paying you to be a GC if you don't know what's going on? They might as well be directly involved and know that you don't know what you're doing.
Yeah, and pay less. Right.
And at that point, just do it themselves. And I think this kind of leads into like when you should hire a subcontractor. I think the whole like hiring piece of it is including managing it. Like you're going to make sure things happen. Then
you're
hire
finding
a subcontractor.
them and you're managing it.
Right. So it's not just I found the guy and then hand it off.
Yeah.
Like you're hiring the subcontractor or managing that subcontractor relationship when you can do the whole thing.
Yeah. I think specifically because you're promising to the client that you're going to fulfill the project to a certain standard.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And so like because your name is on the contract, hopefully a contract, right? Guys have contracts.
We have other episodes on that.
Oh, yeah. Because your name's on the contract, like you own it. So like back to your liability statement earlier, it's like the liability is on you. Yes, your subcontractors have a level of liability too. But I mean, I think that's the piece of what you're saying. You've got to know what you're doing. I like to think you don't, because I kind of like fantasize this, like me being a GC someday. And I'm like, I know nothing about construction. No, but I don't have any of the prerequisites, that we're talking about.
So let's talk about, since you don't, how would you get them? And I think that comes down to often people acquire certain like auxiliary skills by just being around it, like working on, if you're a trim carpenter, you're going to see other stuff happening around you.
Visually, like learning that way.
Yeah, you're going to learn a lot of stuff as well. I think also when it comes down to managing subcontractors, you're going to learn a lot by working for a GC or working for another company where you're seeing, you have less responsibility. You're not responsible for the outcome. But at the same time, you're introduced to more of the nuance of what's going on. You're introduced to the big picture. And I think you just can't replace that experience any other way. You got to see it. You got to feel it. You got to do it. You just can't just jump in. Or you just go to the school of hard knocks, which can be done. But
Anyway. What was it that I was saying earlier? I was like, if you think it's going to be simple, or what was it that I said earlier? If you think it's going to be easy, don't do it.
Yeah, right. There you go. Right, exactly. That is
it's a red flag.
Yeah, red flag of like, oh, maybe you should.
Like how hard could it be? That's what I was saying. How hard could it be? It's like, well, it's probably too hard. My husband tells me that all the time. He's like, if you think that, because I like to think that way. Yeah. I'm like, oh, I can figure it out.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
And so he likes to set me straight. It's
good.
That's
way harder than you think.
Yeah, exactly.
I think one thing that could work really well in this, it's sort of like intermediary step of like moving from doing your work yourself and hiring subcontractors would be this sort of hybrid approach. So you need your bathroom redone. And I'm your contractor.
I do actually. Yeah.
When are we doing that?
What's your availability? Is it free?
Yeah. For you? So next thing you know, you have this level of core skill. Like I have things that I'm going to bring to the table. I'm going to be an expert at the tile. I'm going to be so many things that I'm going to self-perform as a part of this work, but I'm not going to do the electrical or the plumbing. I'm not going to do the glass work, but I'm also, let's say if I was coming from a standpoint of like, I focused on doing my craft. I do my tile setting, and I'm going to make sure that all the finishes up to the point of, or really the auxiliary pieces of the bathroom are going to be amazing. But when it comes down to wiring, what I'm going to say is, I have this guy, he's an amazing electrician. I'm going to connect the two of you. If my skills don't align if we don't have the prerequisites we're talking about earlier in managing subs, why do I take that liability on? Why do I tell you I'm going to make sure that the electrical stuff's amazing if that's not my thing?
Because you don't know what's amazing, right?
Yes. The first thing you're going to do is saying, okay, I need to go do some vetting myself. I need to learn. I need to ask questions. And you're aware of that. And we're working together to have a high quality outcome. The same thing with the shower glass. I'm going to say, I know a guy. He's the expert. I'm going to let you ask the right questions to him instead of involving myself into something I'm not good at. Same thing with a granite shop. It's like when it comes down to the countertop, I'm going to let you work directly with that granite shop to assure high quality outcome. So we're working together.
I like that too, even from the customer standpoint, because you're like, hey, high quality outcome is the end goal for both of us. You customer and me contractor, and I think that's super clear when you're up front like that, like that honesty, that level of honesty is so awesome, because it's like, hey, we're aligned and we're working towards the same thing is what that communicates.
And then I'm crushing it from my standpoint and getting my stuff done. unless there's a situation where one of these trades, like the electrician, is holding me up from doing my work.
Yeah. I could see there being a little bit of challenge there because I'm like, the homeowner has no idea of order of operations or whatever needs to be done. So then it's like, when does the homeowner schedule the electrician? Who's the electrician communicating with? There would be some things to set up well on that of like, hey, is it okay if you call the electrician when we need him or whatever? Like I think communicating on that up front would probably alleviate a little bit of scheduling pressure maybe down the road.
So neither one of those scenarios is ideal that we're talking about, that you manage them or I manage them.
Right.
Because I don't have the skills and experience to manage subcontract. I don't have the processes in place yet. If I'm in that position of, I just do, I haven't run a business yet, let's say. And you're not in a position to manage somebody well because you're a homeowner.
I have no idea.
So neither one of us is in a great position. But I think what I like about that is we're calling it out.
Yeah.
Of like, we're working towards the same result, but at the same time acknowledging the fact of like, I hadn't done that before yet.
Yeah.
As opposed to growing to the place where I arrived at later in business of being like, okay, I have the electrician. I know how to manage the electrician. I'm adding value to the conversation. I'm taking that off your plate.
That's good.
And I can make sure that the processes are in place to make sure we have a high quality outcome.
Yeah.
So don't manage something you're not qualified to manage. You don't have experience in doing it. Why put yourself in that position?
That's good.
You're just giving yourself a headache.
And then what I, hear in some of that too is whenever you've gotten some experience, maybe with this electrician you're talking about, you've worked with them on a few jobs, you know how they operate, you know, to what level they can fulfill, things like that. You build some more relationship there, then maybe it does make sense eventually to add them as a subcontractor and then you manage that part. But again, I think it can be slow and progressive. You don't have to go from I do everything and, the scenario you just talked about of like, I can do this piece and then you go find these people.
Yes.
I recommend these. It can be slow in terms of what trades do you actually fulfill.
As I'll hire the electrician and the plumber, and you hire the granite and the glass.
Exactly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right. That could work amazing. Yeah. And I'll have my checklist for my electrician of like, we're going to do a rough-in check, make sure all the receptacles, all the devices are in the right spot. That we have a walkthrough. That like we made sure things are done right. And I have the skills and experience now to manage that well. I'm great. We're ready to go. But that's
built, not necessarily
not assumed from day one. Yeah. So I think and some of you guys listening are going to say, well, you're way past that.
You're like, obviously.
Like, what are you guys talking about? Of course we should manage the subcontractor.
Yeah, right.
And fair.
Yes, we agree.
Yeah, we get it. You should. But if you don't put yourself in the position prematurely.
Yes, that's good.
Yeah.
So when should you not?
I think that's one of the scenarios. You're not qualified to do it. It's not your expertise, or you just. It's like, man, I've never done that before. Well, anytime you've never done something before, you should question whether or not you should be the person responsible for the outcome.
And then the like, how hard could it be mentality, like we were talking about earlier too. Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and I think the other aspect of it, and this will really tie in where we're going next with employees, is if this is an aspect of the work where you are really expert at, really good at, and it's a core part of your operations, maybe that's something in-house. Maybe that's something you want to do yourself or hire people to do. So I think that's really good. Is kind of where we're going next. We started off earlier talking about sort of the negatives employees, some of the stories, and now we're talking about, okay, what's the effective employee management look like? Yeah.
So what's that look like for managing employees effectively versus subcontractors?
Just because we want to be good at something doesn't mean we are good at it. And I think that's something we see a lot where people are like, I want to manage a team well. I want to be a great boss. I want to do all these things. It doesn't necessarily mean that that is the case.
Right.
So I think we want to make sure that it's also a core service. Just because we want to manage people doesn't mean we should be having them do what we want them to do. But it's like we find a great fit, something we're good at managing. It's also the service we want to provide. We had other podcast episodes about this too, of just like limiting scope, of not doing everything.
Find your niche, really.
Find your niche. Yeah, right. Number one thing before you hire your first person, though, is you need a people first mindset. And what do we mean by that?
Yeah.
There's a big shift when you go to hiring a person versus a subcontractor. I can hire a subcontractor, they can do the job, and we can just pay them, and that's that. You hire
projects,
a person.
Clean end, clean start, right?
Yep. You hire a person, and suddenly you have responsibility to that person. They're counting on you.
Yeah.
And, paycheck, safety, work-life balance, benefits, growth. I mean, who wants to be part of a job where they can't grow?
Yeah.
And so the people-first culture is going to say, I can provide all those things. And or at least that's the goal, and I'm working towards providing those things if you don't have it from day one.
Yep.
And even what we're talking about with the honesty aspect of calling that out, even with the employees, of like, this is the vision, this is what I want to do, and here's where I'm at today.
Yeah.
Do you want to sign up for that? Because not everybody will. And if you sign somebody up under false pretenses, they're going to be dissatisfied. And I've done that. I've
Yeah.
hired people and say, this is going to be amazing. And then, 2, 3, 4 months in, 6 months into it,
It wasn't.
it wasn't.
Whatever. Yeah.
It wasn't quite. It wasn't meeting what they thought the job was. And so calling things out.
Yeah.
Um,
I think there's an overhead piece to it too. Like it's more of like a warning, maybe a warning. I don't know, just something to be aware of like if you're planning on hiring employees, your overhead is going to increase. So can you give it like a scenario or story like that?
You have overhead in managing people suddenly because all of that time you spend managing.
Right.
When we say managing, of like spending time teeing people up to win, vetting
Training,
people, all that
coaching,
stuff, takes time.
Right.
So this is where the piece where you can hire a subcontractor at $75 an hour and make money, and hire an employee at $25 an hour and lose money, is because if you don't have work for that person teed up, ready to go, where they're highly efficient and making money at a 2 to 3x ratio past what you're paying them, you're losing money.
Well, that, and if they make lots of mistakes, then you're eating into it. Right. Exactly. Like if it's someone on your team, but you're paying them less, like you actually could be paying them more.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think that's a key warning, caution of thinking, I don't really have any interest in being a plumber or hiring or building a plumbing business, but I hired a plumber because I had some plumbing work. I should have subcontracted, not hire a plumber.
Yeah.
And next thing I know, I'm having a hard conversation with a plumber saying, hey, I don't have enough work for you.
Yep.
It's a bad situation for him and for me.
Yep.
Instead of just being like, hey, I've got a bunch of work for you. You want to work for me and work for other people. It's the responsibilities on him. So I think don't jump that too prematurely.
That's
and
good.
As much as, we've learned that lesson the hard way.
Yep. Make sure you have a role, not a project.
Yeah.
Hire for roles, subcontract for projects.
And don't take that responsibility lightly. It really is. It is weighty. Sometimes the smartest thing to do is hire somebody else to do the work and not hire an employee.
Yeah, it's good.
Employees. It's a lot involved with hiring employees, taxes and everything else.
Yeah.
All we're really talking about with subcontractors and employees, we really need to kind of take a step back and think about, what are my goals?
Yeah.
Where am I going? Where do I want to go? Are you trying to build a multi-million-dollar business?
Yeah.
Or are you just or do you really enjoy the craftsmanship side of it? Do you want to be in there pounding nails? And so many people we know just love what they do.
Yeah.
And somehow or another, they find themselves in a position where there's too much work and they can't get it all done. And then they hire mediocre people to do things that they're expert at, getting lousy results and frustrated.
Yeah.
And they don't have the skills or experience growing a team. Neither do they want those skills or experiences necessarily. Like if that's your position, like you need to reflect on it heavily before you start managing people.
That, or you just need to learn to say no and like just fulfill the work that you can complete and love the craft.
Yeah.
And that's okay too. It's honorable. It's good. Like you don't have to scale a multi-million-dollar business, but it's like at least know the vision, know the goal of where you're wanting to end up.
I think that is crucial. And the aspect of basically recognizing your value now becomes in how quickly and how expertly you do work and how much that's worth. For instance, if somebody's just mediocre, getting started with something might be worth $25 an hour. If you get in there and absolutely crush it and you're 8 times more efficient as that person, well, that's $200 an hour.
Right. Yeah.
That's
you're
the
just
value
that much
of it.
better.
You're just that much better. And so it's like, well, that's, the time you take out some of the taxes and overhead, you make it $300,000 a year plus doing something that it might be an extreme example of something.
It sounds extreme. It sounds good.
I set us up,
Like, see, how hard can it be? Back to that. Just kidding.
But nonetheless, that might be on the high end of something that could happen. But there's a level of fairness to that.
For sure.
That and maybe we can take something more like $100 an hour or something like that. Too. What are we, lawyers?
What am I doing here? I'm just kidding. No, I think that's really good. Yeah, I was talking to a contractor just yesterday, actually, and he has worked with a concrete contractor, and he's worked with a colleague 3 to 4 years, and they just have different visions. Like he's coming to the point where he's like, I want to build a multi-million-dollar business, concrete business, and my business partner doesn't. He's okay with just, not even status quo. I don't want it to sound negative, but like he's okay with a different level of business, and there's nothing wrong with either scenario. I think it's just like the needs, the value, all of what we're talking about even today is somewhat dependent. Like what's relevant to you is somewhat dependent on like, where are you going? Like, do you need to hire people? Well, it just depends. Like, do you need to scale or like what balls are being dropped? Some of those kinds of things I think feed into like, should you hire or should you sub?
So let's zoom out one more level. And that is, if you're a general contractor, the things that you love doing, you're an organizer. You are the person that connects people. You're a communicator. Your value proposition is you're detail oriented. You make sure all the pieces fit together. They get done on time. You know how to manage a calendar. You know how to manage people. You know how to be resourceful, find resources to get things done. You're patient. Like that is your value proposition coming.
Yeah.
Yes, you're operationally minded person. And I think if that's you and that's what you want to scale, that's what you want to grow, you should be hiring subcontractors to do your work.
Yeah.
Because you're an operational person.
Yep.
And if it's you of saying, I want a niche, I'm going to be the best electrical contractor in Springfield, Missouri, or wherever you live, or I want to scale a cabinet business or a trim carpentry business, whatever else, you're hiring people to do that. Sometimes that involves a business partner that has skills that you don't have to manage people and to grow. But nonetheless, I think when you can find a niche, when you can find something that really works, I think that's a key distinction.
It is, yeah.
And then the third level is where you're just happy being you and building quality and going from good, better to best.
Yeah.
And you're just content. You don't have to scale. You don't have to grow. You don't have to hire anybody. You're just going to be great and see what the future holds.
Yeah.
That could be a great scenario too.
Yeah. It's a good point. Good call out. What's the difference? You talk about organizer, but then I'm like, there's other roles too. There's designers, there's engineers, and then there's doers too. I think the doer is like what you're talking about of like the craftsman, the person who's actually like building, right? They're installing, ground molding, they're installing, but how does like the designer, the engineer, like are those subbed out roles? Are they, it probably depends on the business. If it's a design build firm, or company, then they might have designers on their staff, on their actual, as employees.
And I think what they've identified is companies within companies almost, of being like, I have a great design team.
Yeah,
they handle that part of the process, and then they hand it off to the next stage, which is fulfillment.
Yep.
I was just, now we have a great design. You're happy with your design.
Got it.
Now we're going to go build it. And I think supplementally, like engineers are the ones that make things don't fall apart. That's solid. We're taking our understanding of science and applying it to this project to make sure that it's quality.
Right.
So I think that they're into this, the building science. They're into, making sure that things are right, and then I think you have the craftsman, the doer, the person that's saying, essentially what they look back with pride is that project there, I built that. And then, that's the craftsman, right?
Yep.
And then I think the organizer is looking at that project saying, that's my project too.
I made it happen.
I made it happen. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
And the designer's like, man, look at that design. I designed that thing.
Yeah,
Look at that.
Good.
All that, just it's make you weep. It's so beautiful.
I love it. That's good. That's good.
Yeah.
But I think there's limitations though on doing them all, right?
Like
being able to do, you can't. I don't know if you actually. I'm not convinced you can do them all. I think they're all different. left brain, right brain, personality traits, skill sets, like all those kinds of things. But I don't think you have enough time, capacity, right? Or, skill sets, interests, or passions, right? I'm like, if you're an engineer, you're probably on a little bit different, I don't know what I'm trying to say.
Wavelength.
Yeah. Than a designer, right? Like that's totally two different, like math, science versus design, beautiful things, creativity, those kinds of things. Anyway.
Right.
So I think it's just, you can't be all those things. So surrounding yourself with a team that can be excellent.
Yeah.
Whether that's employees, sometimes it's going to be employees and sometimes it's going to be subcontracted out.
That's such a great call out. And if you're in a spot where I'm trying to be all things to all people, you're just not saying no enough, because people need things done and they go to the people they know.
Yeah.
And they're saying, hey, Kinsey, can you do this? And you're good at saying no and be like, nope, that's not my thing.
Yeah.
And I think we could all be better contractors, better designers, better engineers if we just say, that's not my thing.
Right.
But this is the guy we can work with to get that done. He's going to be the GC, I'm going to be the designer, or whatever the piece is. And if there's crossover in roles, how do we work best where there's companies within companies kind of a thing, where I'm doing the design piece, handing it off to the build team, and we're all part of the same team, making something happen.
That's good. Yeah, I know we're kind of wrapping up the episode too, but one of the things that just kind of keeps coming to mind, because we're talking about hiring employees versus subcontractors in this episode. So really like the fulfillment side is kind of what we've been talking about, like hiring additional trim carpenters versus subbing out your trim carpentry. You're right, like just to oversimplify that. But what about like internal roles, like accounting, things like that? I'm just thinking about like, that could be where a lot of people are finding themselves even coming to this podcast of, well, I don't need necessarily more field people. I need somebody to help me with the office stuff and with the, so what's your kind of take on that side of things of when to maybe hire roles for the organizational side?
It's really good that you brought that up. Some of the stuff we talked about earlier applies, like project, if you need your taxes done, don't hire somebody to do taxes, do it because it's a project, taxes are done, there's nothing else to do.
Yeah.
So there's definitely like, that's a guiding principle of like, am I hiring for a project or am I hiring for a full-time role that I can sustain for years and years?
Yeah.
Guiding light. I think the other aspect of it is too, is this a part-time position where it's, an office manager? What am I expecting someone to do? Yeah. And I think the common mistake is I need an office manager, I need a project manager, I need a designer, I need a salesperson, an estimator.
Yeah.
And I'm going to hire one person to do all those things. And maybe the strategy should be automate some more processes, systematize more things, and try to be or even hire part-time roles for something of like subcontract with, an estimating service or use, software to help with that. I mean, like there's aspects of maybe it's not a person you need, maybe it's not an employee you need
a different way.
Yeah. And then also the expectations are so crucial as well. Like if you're hiring an accounting company, what do you expect them to do for you?
Yeah. Is it clear?
Do you expect them to guide your business? Like you need a CFO or do you need somebody just to like do data entry?
Right.
If you need data entry, maybe a family member can do that or somebody can do it for $15
Be careful hiring family.
Yeah. But like internally,
but
like,
yes,
if,
I know what you mean.
We don't hire an accountant here to do data entry. Right. It just happens. We do it. Well, we know what we need to do. But when it comes down to like some of the things that we might not have skills in and we need something done, like research and development tax credits or something like that. Well, we're going to hire somebody else to do that. And it's a project.
Yeah.
They do it, we pay them, and that's done.
Great call out.
So,
like
and so a lot of times it's not about hiring. And then the other piece is don't hire prematurely. If I have to go back and start a construction business again, I would wait much longer before I'd hire roles.
Yeah.
And I just almost like there's that tension between scale and it's like make sure the profitability is there where you've mastered the process of fulfillment and then scale. So
yeah, it's good.
Yep. Work needs done, subcontract or employee. I think it just comes down to sometimes you want to do neither one. Don't grow. If you have limited experience, let your clients take some of that risk with hiring subs directly.
Yeah. Back to that bathroom example.
You perform the quality. That's the sweet spot. And then if you have a limited amount of work, like this is a project, subcontract every time. You don't have a role. The other aspect is you don't have experience, subcontract.
Yeah.
But if it's long-term work, core operations, hire employees.
You have a full pipeline, those kinds of things.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I think if you have the ability to manage, encourage, grow people, not just want to, but know how to. Yeah,
you have to have the desire and the know-how.
Yes, not one or the other.
Right.
And patience, active listening. I think those are required for both. But I mean, but nonetheless, I think that leans more heavily towards the employee side. If you're kind of like a get stuff done, kind of like let them handle all that stuff, hire subcontractors.
Sounds great.
You're like subcontractor every day.
Get it done. Okay. No, I think that's good. And I think that patience, active listening thing goes back to the responsibility you're taking on with hiring an employee. That's why that's such a crucial skill. Yeah. Is because it's more than just a project. When you're bringing somebody on your team, it's livelihood and it's, their family and it's, just a lot more responsibility.
Yeah.
So,
awesome. So hopefully this has been helpful for you guys. Thank you so much for listening. We'll catch you next time and I think the next kind of tee it up a little bit.
Be careful committing to things we don't.
I think we really want to dive more into the whole aspect of like roles and responsibilities and even more of like even perspectives and personas of like, we have proclivities towards certain roles. And kind of diving more into that. So we kind of like, we're kind of dancing around it right now.
Yeah, we're gonna do that definitely in the next few months.
Sometime we're not gonna overpromise, underdeliver.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, surprise is coming soon.
Yeah, we'll catch you back next time. Thanks for checking it out.